The sharp drop in the price of global oil as a result of the pandemic has put the Nigerian exchange rate in crisis, leading to an outright scarcity of the dollar, thereby putting pressure on the local currency. The scarcity in forex have had and is still having great impact on different sectors of the economy, and of the most significant is the daily operations on local airlines. The liquidity crisis is eating deeper into the activities of this sector, causing airlines' capacity to dwindle, causing the fares to hit the roof. In a recent development, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria assured exporters that it will give them continuous free-for-all access to their export proceeds as part of the monetary control measures by the Apex Bank to ensure more dollar inflow and maintain forex liquidity. As the pressure on exchange rates grew, leading to speculations of a devaluation to reflect the true value of the Naira, the Apex Bank continues to introduce policies to water down the pressure on the economy. One of which is the Naira for dollar scheme and the move to devalue official exchange rates in the first quarter of the year 2021. While the Monetary Policy Committee is set to hold its next meeting in May, what more policy should we expect from the CBN to sustain the value of the Naira amidst other economic challenges? I have joining me via Skype the fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Mr. Oyedele, good afternoon and thank you for your time.
Good afternoon, Tolu. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I want to tie this to my first discussion. Already MPC is saying we will not be able to support FARC as much as we used to do because of the importation, the differentials, subsidy issues. That's on one side. And we have issues with Forex too. We are trying to see how we can manage our Forex end of it. What's your assessment of the exchange rate policy in this country at the moment?
Yeah, so I think we live in very difficult and challenging times. We should not pretend about it. And what that means is there are no easy answers and there's no silver bullet. Because while you're trying to move in one direction to address one problem, you may inadvertently be creating a bigger problem at the other side. So like you mentioned already, NMPC is having to subsidize petrol in particular. So it's not even all petroleum products. It's just really petrol by over 100 billion naira per month. And the reality is that it's not sustainable. There's no budget for subsidy, but NMPC is doing under recovery. So the thing is that for under recovery, you don't need to budget for it. It just means you are selling at a loss. But the impact is the fact that there's no money to remit to the federation account, and therefore don't expect FARC in May, which means a lot. Even at this time, when they're still having some amounts to share, many states are struggling. Federal government is struggling. Borrowing is huge. The gap in deficit is expanding. And if you think about it also, inflation rate is high. And the textbook answer to that from a monetary point of view would be to raise interest rates so that the inflation can come down and so that you can attract more inflow of FX to strengthen your Naira. But all of this will not work because the inflation is not driven by oversupply of money. It's just a question of output. We don't have enough output to be able to drive down price. And this is being influenced significantly by the increase in food inflation. And also, on the other hand, if you think about it, that the economic recovery is very fragile. We had only just 0.11% positive growth for the last quarter of 2020. So you cannot be increasing raising rates because that would also compromise your ability to recover. So these are tough times, no easy answers, but I think that whatever we need to do, fundamentally, we have to think about how do you bring back investors' confidence. I think that's the only one that is constant into all the options and the available tools and alternatives.
Well, I totally agree with you. Investors' confidence remains key at this time. But what about this argument that we need a market-reflective exchange rate? Some say this could bring clarity and certainty to the market.
Yeah, I do agree, and I think it's also part of the investors' confidence. So if you artificially keep your exchange rate within a band or a range, and that the market knows you cannot sustain, then there's no confidence for investors, and FDI, FPI would not flow in your direction. The reality is that if you say your exchange rate is whatever it is, maybe 390, maybe 400, but I can't get it in the market, then that certainly means that is not the true exchange rate. It's not market reflective. I know that trying to get a market reflective rate also has implications. One of those implications is you're going to have imported inflation. So even the price of petrol we are talking about, the subsidy will go up because it simply means the Naira equivalent of the price of petrol would go up, and then more subsidies will be required. We still import a lot of items, including food items. So if you have a market reflective exchange rate today, it means that the imported landing price of those products in Naira would also go up. But I think that overall, having a market reflective exchange rate is only going to be a short-term problem. It will be beneficial in the medium to long term, because part of the benefit is because you then are able to restore investors' confidence. If you complement that with other policies, including fiscal policy, then you start attracting inflow of foreign currency, and that will help you to be able to stabilize the value of the Naira. So Fed, for example, left their rates towards near zero. So, and that is positive because it means that we don't have an additional pressure of money moving in the direction of US away from markets like Nigeria.
Now, I envy the central bank governor at this time. This is not the best times to be a central bank governor, not just in Nigeria, across the world, because of what's happening globally with economies and all of it. We've seen schemes and initiatives being introduced by the Apex Bank, Diaspora Remittances, trying to just get these monies in an augment. And also the recent one, I think, is still on, the Naira for dollar. I was talking to someone and he said he was almost leaving the bank and he was called back to come get his Naira when he went to get his dollar cash. What do you make of all of these initiatives? It's worked well in some countries, remarkable, progress being made with it. But what would you say about it in our climate?
Yeah, I think, every country is different. So you can always learn from what other countries are doing. But at the end of the day, you have to localize it and see whether it will work. At the end of the day, every human being is a rational being, and they make decisions based on what is best for them from an economic point of view. So if you say to me, bring in dollars, and then I'll give you 4 Naira for every dollar that you bring, an additional amount, but you're offering to give me this, dollar at a rate that, I can get more than that in the black market. So the idea is, is that attractive enough for me to bring my dollars? And even if it's attractive, the sources of the dollars we are talking about, what's happening to the sources? This is, we're talking about diaspora remittances. Many of our people abroad who send us money in Nigeria are also struggling. Many of them are living on palliatives and, various stimulus packages here and there. Many of them have not been back to work. So which means their ability to send money back home is constrained significantly, whether you give them incentive or not. You cannot give what you don't have. You can't send the money that you don't have. So these are some of the challenges we're facing. That's why we have not seen any remarkable improvement in the supply of dollars through the diaspora remittances channel, despite that policy. So I don't think it's going to be anything drastically different in the next coming weeks or coming months. But if you put all of this together, so I think the CBN, in fairness to them, are doing a lot. So particularly in terms of various credits to different sectors, from SME to agri to manufacturing to even the health sector. And these credits are moving in the right direction, in my view, because we are channeling them towards productivity and output, which is what we really need. And that in itself can help stimulate growth, create employment, and hopefully be able to help us deal with some of the economic challenges we are having which are also fueling insecurity.
Oh, okay. Let me follow up with that. We also talk about improving exports at this time so that we can get some foreign exchange into the country. But some business people will say some policies are also debarring them or affecting productivity of their business. How can we increase productivity and production at this time? Maybe we can do more of exports at this time to get some more foreign exchange and maybe support the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Yeah, indeed. So, on paper, it's brilliant to want to increase exports so that you can earn more foreign exchange. In reality, that's a very complex thing to do. And it's in fact not something you can do in the short term. You cannot just say, I want to earn more from exports, and you say it today, and by next month it happens. So it takes a lot longer than that. But what you can do, which is, possible in the immediate and short term, is how can you improve productivity, particularly in areas like food supply, where we're having insecurity issues, so that people can actually just go to the farm and harvest what they have there already. Plus also, how can you improve the local supply so that you reduce dependence on importation? So because the impact is the same thing. If I increase my exports, I have more foreign exchange earnings. But if I'm unable to increase my exports in the short term, but I can increase my productivity locally so that what I have to import is less, so my need for dollars would also be less. So the impact is positive. So I do think that what government can do at the moment, in my view, is to focus on those impediments that is making it difficult for us to have productivity at the level we should. Think about manufacturers, for example. Capacity utilization, confidence is low. We have a lot of challenges, even just sourcing raw materials. So people who are into services, even almost anything you think about, sometimes it's regulation, over-regulation here, multiple taxation over there, lack of clarity, clearing things from the port is rocket science. So these issues are making things unnecessarily difficult that they need to be. If government can focus on those and say, how can we make it easier for people to do their legitimate businesses, whether they're small companies, whether they're big companies, whether they're in the risk sector, whether it's services, whatever it is, let's make it easier for people to be productive, and that we can start addressing the issue of having to import everything. And then we hope that the likes of Dangote refinery, when they do eventually come on stream, maybe later on in the year or early next year, and that can also save you billions of dollars in having to import refined petroleum products. So these combined effects, I think, should be able to help. But what do you do in the short term is what is really the issue. And I think that should be around addressing impediments and introducing policies that give investors confidence so that gross capital formation will increase and we start seeing more investment. Without investment, there's nothing you can say from now until tomorrow. Nothing will change. You just need more investment to address the challenges we face economically.
True. And when we talk of policy, we also see that at the time, the central bank restricted dollars availability for some particular products that they believe we could manufacture in country. And now we're looking at maybe adding wheat and sugar. Mixed reactions trailed this development, particularly with regards to the restriction in its entirety. What do you also make of that? Yes, like we said earlier, the central bank is just looking for ways to manage the situation. But restricting where we are not building capacity is also something that worries me.
Yeah. So, my position on this has been very consistent. My view is that you cannot restrict importation when you don't have local substitution of the same quantity, of the right quality, and that is available when it's required. Plus, I think that this is more an issue of fiscal policy play rather than monetary policy. So if you ban wheat, you ban importation of, you're not banning them actually, you're saying you cannot get FX. So because these things are not banned from importation, it's okay for you to import them, but you can't buy dollars. So as a fiscal policy play, what you would have done with that is to make an assessment of what do you have available versus what is the demand. And then while you promote local production to subsidize import, you would also at the same time increase the import duty rate progressively. So as you ramp up local production, you raise the import duty rate to keep discouraging further import. You're unable to do that with FX as a policy measure, because the moment you say I cannot buy FX to import wheat or sugar or the other products, immediately my cost of import just goes over the roof, because it means I can only buy at the parallel market. But all the products that I'm using those inputs for are essential. So what happens to the price of bread? What happens to, even just animals who feed on these products? So at the end of the day, you may be fueling inflation further while you're trying to, because these products are still legitimate, just that I cannot get dollars. What that means is you're pushing more and more demand into the parallel market, whereas the supply is constrained. Now, what then happens is the price goes up, and in fact, the risk of arbitrage between the different rates would also increase because the gap widens. So I do not support restricting access to FX to anything that is legitimate when we do not have the local capacity to replace the need for those importations.
Okay, finally, before I let you go, some will say devaluation is the way to go. That if we do that, we could get a little bit of stability. Mr. Oyedele, do you agree to that sentiment?
Yeah, I don't know whether I'll call it devaluation because if you want $10 today, where would you get it and at what rate? So to many people, the Naira is already devalued because the rate they can get is already over the roof. It's not the official rate. So I'll probably say it's a question of unifying the rate, of moving progressively towards harmonization. So we have to be deliberate in doing that. The more items you ban from gaining access to FX, the bigger the chances that you would not be able to unify. The more you give incentive for diaspora remittances to get Naira for dollars that is not available to other inflow of dollars, the more you create these problems of divergence in rates. So we need to start taking practical steps that is coordinated and is focused towards the ultimate objective of harmonizing rates. The intention that in itself will increase investors' confidence and will start attracting inflow of FDI, FPI, and very hopefully also foreign diaspora remittances. And over time, we'll be able to have sufficient dollars, reduce our need for imports with refining locally and other products, and then Naira can be stable.
As we move to another MPC meeting, can we just do a little bit of projections? What are you thinking? What would the committee have to grapple with? A lot is in the kitty for them.
Yeah, I expect that they will hold rates. If you think about the last MPC meeting, it wasn't unanimous. I think there was about 3 members who thought that it should even increase MPR. But the circumstances have worsened. The economic circumstances has worsened since then. So which means if you now increase rates, it goes against your objective of trying to stimulate the economy, even though it may help a little bit with inflation control and exchange rate. But overall, it's not going to move in the right direction for the economy. Also bear in mind that yields are going up. So for T-bills, the yields for the last auction is close to 10%. The yield on bond is now double digit. So government cannot also afford for these rates to keep going up, bearing in mind that a lot of our funding of the budget is being borrowed. And the more you borrow to fund the budget, the higher the rate, the higher your debt service to revenue ratio, the more sustainable your debt profile becomes, the higher the risk of borrowing, and everything just links together like that. So I expect that they will keep rates on hold.
All right, fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele. Thank you very much for you spending your time with us and enlightening us clearly on this very important topic of discuss.